Good. Thank you, everyone. Girish Balachandran, and I am calling the meeting of California Community Power to order. Brittany, would you please verify our meeting quorum?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can see by the video screen that we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Item 3 on our agenda, the matters subsequent to posting the agenda, and there aren't any. I'll go to item 4, which is public comment, and any member of the public may address the board of directors concerning any matter not on the agenda. If any member of the public has a comment, please raise your hand. I have one hand raised, Rick Bonilla from San Mateo. Rick.
Mr. Bonilla, you are able to unmute yourself.
And I have. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Board of Directors, for meeting. I applaud the work that you have done in the past, as I have said before, and I look very hopefully at the future, the work we're looking to do. I want to say that upon looking at the agenda for this month's meeting, I did not see any explicit detail regarding further discussions regarding policies. So I would just like to once again encourage the board to move forward with creating policies that go beyond the interim long duration storage policy, which I appreciate. And that's basically it. So please let us know what's going on with going forward. Mostly I'm interested in the labor policies, as you know. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. Before we go to the next, this will get touched upon at the general manager's report, your comment. Next on the list is James Rui Gomez.
Good evening. My name is James Rui Gomez. I'm here speaking on behalf of the San Mateo Building Trade Council and the Regional Building Trade Council of building trades from Monterey up to past Santa Rosa. I too would like to see a robust conversation about labor policies, and I don't think that it's too far-fetched to go with a project labor agreement or a community workforce agreement policy. It's been my experience that other JPAs like the high-speed rail, the San Francisco PUC with the Hetch-Hetchy rebuilding of their pipes, that they have required project labor agreements. Also BCDC with the Bay Restoration, any funds utilized through 2A to rebuild levees in our Bay Area region, it is required to utilize a project labor agreement or community workforce agreement. I think that is not too far reaching for this JPA to achieve, and we look forward to partnering with you and having those conversations and helping you create those type of workforce policies, just as we did with the Peninsula Clean Energy as part of the original advisory committee. It was very important that labor was involved and that we had local control. And now that it's going to be state, well, half the state here in your guys' JPA, and there's another JPA for the southern half, that it's not too far reaching to have a community workforce agreement on any new renewable projects, any long duration storages, any windmill projects, any solar projects. And I would just like to thank you guys for that consideration. Thank you. Have a great day. It's been a great meeting.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other raised hands on public comments, so we'll bring it back to the agenda and move to item 5, consent agenda. Do we have, does any board member want to pull this for discussion? Or if not, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
I'll move we approve the consent.
This is Jan, I'll second.
Thank you. RCA and PCE motion and second. And Brittany, you're going to do a roll call.
Yes, for the consent agenda, Central Coast Community Energy.
Yes.
Clean Power San Francisco,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy, I believe is absent. Marin Clean Energy,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Community Energy
Yes.
Authority, apologize. San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
and Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The consent agenda passes.
Thank you, Brittany. Moving on to item 6, regular agenda items. 6A is the board chair report. First, I'd like to report that the ad hoc committee that I formed to help with the general manager and the general counsel selection has done their job. So I am dissolving that committee, that ad hoc committee. There's no need for it anymore. So that's announcement number 1. The second is, I think a couple of months back when we talked about LDS and updated the budget, I had recommended creating an ad hoc committee of Dawn and myself to be a sounding board for as we were transitioning from Jim Shetler to Tim Haynes on the LDS project. As we are kind of coming into the last lap of this project, and you'll see that's going to be discussed, I'd like to expand that ad hoc committee to Lori Mitchell and Mitch Sears. I have talked to them and they've both accepted being on that ad hoc committee. And the purpose of that ad hoc committee is to both be a sounding board for Tim Haynes and the negotiating team and get us through this last lap in a timely manner and on budget. So those are my 2 announcements. Any questions or comments on my report? Okay, not seeing anything. Any comments? And then I guess any public comment? Not seeing any raised hands. I'll now move to item 6B and hand it over to Tim Haynes for the general manager's report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and board members. Girish, before I get in, Mr. Chair, before I get into the items that I wanted to discuss, I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I would like to switch the order of items 6C and 6D, having D precede 6C.
That's fine. Yeah,
Yep.
Go ahead. We'll switch it.
All right, thank you much. Excuse me while I adjust my computer. The items that we have in front of us with 6A through E are interrelated with one another. And so as I spend time walking you through each individual item, I'd like you to also think of the interrelationship with these. I'll try and spill it out as I go forward in order to be able to give you how I'm seeing the interrelationship between each of these items. But the first item that we have is unfinished business. In April, the board adopted interim policies with regard to the labor, environmental, and environmental justice. And my plan is to convene the ad hoc committee that the chair has stood up, and will work with the committee to develop a final policy that we're able to bring to the board for its adoption in the coming months. Director Hale has volunteered her assistant to help me schedule these meetings. I think Director Hale understands that I'm a bit challenged in being able to do this on my own, and so has offered her administrative support for that. Mr. Chair, if there are any questions, otherwise I'll go on.
Yep, if there are any questions, you're still on your GM report. Yeah, just go ahead.
Yeah. There's a second item on the GM report, and then I'll wrap up with this. As I've tried to orient myself with what it is that we have on our plate, it's helpful for me to look forward at, and that includes the upcoming board schedule. That's listed here, and what I wanted to do is just highlight some items for you, because these are going to involve the board in order to be able to allow us to continue to make progress on each of these items. In September, what we have done is targeted that for the CC Power to issue its notice to the membership of the intent for CC Power to adopt long duration storage projects. We'll get into that in more detail later in the discussion. Another item in September is seeking the board authority and approval to issue a geothermal biomass RFO and the associated budget. In October, we don't have an October agenda calendar or board meeting calendared, and what I'd like to be able to do is add that to the calendar. My expectation is that we would use that meeting to introduce some ideas with regard to the 2022 CC Power budget. November, what we would be looking at is authority to enter into the long duration storage contracts that we'd issued notice on in September, and to potentially adopt the 2022 CC Power budget. There's not a December meeting on the calendar either, and I think just to be careful, like to schedule that in order to be able to make sure that there's any matters that continue, that we have the ability to be able to meet with the board on those through the end of the year. So that's what I wanted to discuss in this particular item, Mr. Chair.
Great. Board members, do you have any questions for Tim? Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Okay, I see one raised hand. Bill Knack, please unmute and speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just have a quick question for Tim. Do you have any sense of when you think the ad hoc committee on policies might come back with some initial recommendation, and do you plan on, reporting updates on that progress between now and your recommendation?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I'm here. So, Bill, I'm just going to take that since I pointed the ad hoc committee. You may have missed it earlier. The meetings are going to be set up, and based on what the policy committee comes back with, we'll bring it back, but there will be an update at the next meeting. And the target is to try and get some policies to the board in the September-October timeframe. Okay, is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we are now going to go to the next one. We have switched item 6D and 6C. So item 6D, Tim?
Yes, This is with regard to the long lead time RFO, that it's biomass and geothermal resources. The intent here is to give you a heads up that in September, we will be coming to seek the authority to issue the RFO. Accompanying that, we will provide you with a budget that will lay out what our timing and cost expectations are. I think it's important for us to reflect on what it is that we've attempted to accomplish with the long duration storage contracting effort, because the steps that we've taken, the decisions that we've made are going to lend themselves to being able to streamline this process and to be able to help us reduce the overall costs. The membership representatives to the Project Oversight Committee met amongst themselves recently, and they agreed to bring this request to the board in September. The expectation is that the contracting approach that we've developed for the long duration storage projects will be available to us to use in this contracting effort. And so we would be able to benefit from everything that we've learned from that effort, which I'll get into in the next discussion. But there's also other areas where we think that we're going to be able to capture some savings. And that has to do with having identified improvements that we will make to the bid evaluation process. We're also looking to be able to learn what we can from the review and approval process of the long duration storage projects that will begin in September with the notification that we'll be providing to the board. Jean Zalay, who is the Deputy Director for Power Resources with San Jose Clean Energy, is leading this effort on behalf of the membership. She's put forward a tentative schedule that would follow from an initial release of the RFP or RFO through the target execution date. And if we look at that, when I look at that, what I see is a shortened process. And that shortened process reflects what it is that we have learned in part from the long duration storage activities that we've gone through. And so we will be more timely in being able to go from the issuance of the RFO through agreement execution. And it's our expectation that we're going to be able to show to you how that translates to cost savings that will be associated with this. I've begun to look into that and have reasonable confidence that we'll be able to present that to you when we present to you the request that we issue the RFO and the associated budget. Without getting into any more detail, Mr. Chair, that's what I had intended to cover with this item.
Great. So on this one, just it is a little typo. It's San Jose Clean Energy and Sonoma Clean Power Authority.
Sorry about that.
Yep. So let's get some comments. We're teeing this up for the September board meeting. So any comments from the board?
The humorous comment that now you know why we didn't call ourselves Sonoma Clean Energy.
My apology.
Okay, Barbara?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tim, for the report. I just want to make sure I'm understanding these different budget plans you're mentioning. I heard you say that we'd be talking about a budget, I think, specific to this RFI, this long lead time RFO,
Yes.
as well as an overall budget. So can you just make sure, talk a little bit more about what the differences are between those two and how they relate to the budget we already have?
When the board adopted the CC Power budget in February, there was a portion of the budget that was allocated to day-to-day operations of CC Power. And then there was a portion that was specific to the long duration storage project. My expectation is that as we go forward and we look at the budget for the geothermal biomass RFO, that it similarly would have its own separate and distinct budget. And then the other budget that I had mentioned during the earlier part of my briefing was the 2022 budget. But again, I think that would be similar to what it is that had been adopted in February for CC Power, and it would be the similar type of structure that we would have going forward. So there would be a budget to address day-to-day operations, and separate, there would be a budget for continuing work associated with the long lead time RFO.
I think you also mentioned how some of the work being done on the long duration storage can create some efficiencies for our next RFO. And I'll, as we talk about these different processes, I'll be interested in understanding how we're budgeting those kind of crossover, beneficial across different projects activities. Thank you.
I think it's an important point for us, not just to look at the activities and the costs that are associated, but how it is that we capture those and then allocate those amongst the membership.
Thank you. So I'm looking to see any other comments from board. Questions. Don't see any hands raised, so I'll open up. Oh, before we go, Mitch?
Yeah, sorry about that. Just a real quick question. Tim, do we anticipate that this budget will be structured similarly to the long duration storage in that it's sort of a stair-step approach? There'd be a cost for participating in the RFO, and then as the project or process move forward, that there would be different costs associated with the different steps. I assume that those types of basic off-ramps would be available on this type of an approach as well.
What the board adopted several months back was the project development process. That's not the right word for it, but that spells out how it is that the funds that are associated with the budgeted items are allocated amongst the members. And early on, what will happen is that there will be an equal share of project costs allocated to the members. And then when we get into it further and there's a better understanding of what may come out of it, the allocation of costs will be done on a proportion basis, and that is how much parties intend to secure during the contracting process. There will also, I haven't thought my way through this, Director Sears, but I have to imagine that there will be stop points along the way where we will check in with the board in order to be able to give a project assessment. And with that, also an update on the budget. And it's probable at that point that there would be opportunities for the budget or for the board to have some questions and decisions that they would be making.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So it sounds like a similar milestone type approach. Thanks.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask, thank you for the question, Mitch. Brittany, let's send to the board the phases that the board has approved before. So we have phase 1, 2, and 3. So let's just send it to them. So that's one follow-up item. Second, all board members, you have a representative on the Project Oversight Committee. And so several of the details of this will be discussed there, and they meet weekly. So please reach out to them to get more communication. All right, I'm now going to move to public comment, and then I'll bring it back to the board if there are further comments or questions. So we have Rick Bonilla. Please unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think it's more of a clarification. When Director Haynes was showing his slide for, I think it said 6D, but on the agenda, it looks like it was 6D. He had a list of 4 items there, and regarding the leads, which was the item on the bottom, it said San Jose Clean Energy, and then it said SCE. I'm not sure which entity that is. Could you please clarify that?
We just clarified that's a typo. It should be Sonoma Clean Power. So
thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, we'll bring it back to the board. Any further comments? Okay, if not, this is, we plan to tee it up for action and commitment to move forward with the RFO at the September board meeting. Thank you. We are now going to move to item 6C that we're taking out of order. Long duration storage project update. Tim?
The highlights here will be with regard to the accomplishments and the major milestones. The major challenge that we've encountered in contracting with CC Power is that it's not a substantial entity. It doesn't have a track record. And as a consequence, what a seller will look for is the backstopping of CC Power from the project participants. When I was appointed in June, what I found is that the Project Oversight Committee members were deep in their review of the different options that could be used in the joint contracting in order to be able to make sure that whatever contract structure we came up with, it provided appropriate limits on participants' liability, and that it led to a project that is financeable. That took 2.5 months in order to be able to work its way through the discussion review process. We've since finalized on that, and we've taken the final credit and collateral position that we've developed in these discussions into the negotiations. The negotiations are at a point where markups of contracts have been exchanged between CC Power and the sellers, and there is development of the project participation agreement that would be developed between the members and CC Power. And so the critical part of being able to make the progress on that contracting effort has been the development of the credit and collateral position. With that behind us and the feedback that we have from the participating members as well as the sellers is that we're on the right track, And that then leads us to targeting September for issuing a notice that CC Power will intends to enter into long duration contracts that will lead to a 60-day review and approval process. We're working on developing the that policy. We will include member representatives in the POC. We will include members of the legal staff that are associated with the agencies. And we will also rely on the board's ad hoc committee in order to be able to make sure that as we develop a process that will lead to contracting, that we're taking into consideration all of those perspectives in order to be able to make sure that we've got the support necessary to enter into the contracts. So that was what I had prepared to discuss on this particular item, Mr. Chair.
Any questions from the board regarding the LDS update?
Yeah, this is Tom. I do have a question. I'm not very clear about that 60 days public notice of consideration. Does that mean once the contracts are negotiated, then the members will have 60 days to figure out whether they want to be in or out, or what exactly goes on from here?
Why don't I have Brittany address that? It's from the JPA.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The JPA, as it's written, requires that the board give each of the members 60-day notice before bringing a project to the board for approval. And so, you know, the JPA is pretty broad about what that notice means, but it is required that we provide 60-day notice under the JPA.
So Tom, the way I interpret that is it's a heads up to the board saying November is when the board will, the earliest they could approve these contracts.
And would it be required of the members to make the commitment at their shops ahead of that November timeframe? So when the board makes an adoption, they are adopting something that is already being backed up by the members. Do I read that correctly? Because at one point or another, we will have to take these projects to our boards for approval. And therefore, is it intended that the 60 days will provide the window for the members to go get their approval? So when they go back to the board 60 days later, it's very clear who is in and who's out, or who's in for lesser quantity than what they went in with. Is that what that 60 days for?
Brittany, please.
Yeah. So the idea would be that the CC Power board would approve the projects first. So no, that 60-day notice isn't for the individual members to bring it to their individual boards. Having said that, that 60-day notice does provide time for the members to get that item agendized for their board once it is approved by CC Power.
Yes. So Tom, September, the way I understand this, September, CC Power will provide a notice to the entire board saying that this clock starting, November would be the earliest that the CC Power board will approve an agreement with the suppliers. After that is when each of us will go to our individual boards to get approval. But the 60-day notice allows each of us to socialize it with our boards as to what's coming. So that's the timeline that we have here.
Is it possible that after the 60 days pass and the board approves of the agreement with the project developer, that one of us will go back to our board and our board will say, no, we don't like it, and therefore you'll end up having somebody drop out? And then would that be the time when that share is going to be picked up by everybody else, now that you have an agreement with the developer, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, the idea would be it would, what is approved by the CC Power Board would be substantially final form. So there wouldn't be an opportunity for the individual members to make amendments at their board level. And so, yeah, there is always that possibility that an individual member board doesn't approve the project, and then we'd have to start that 60-day notice again if there are amendments at that point.
So Tom, I think also some of these questions the Project Oversight Committee is dealing with, I think there are two things, right? One is the amendments. It's not going to have any amendments. That's the way it's like. It's a take it or leave it at this point. So everything's going to be dealt with through the POC. And so when we get the agreements in November and we take it to each of our boards, it's basically final. So CC Power would have signed it, and then each of the boards are going to sign it. Now, there will be a contingency in there which says this contract isn't actually going to be, what should I say, active unless everyone signs it. And I think your other question has to, so one is the amendments issue, which Brittany addressed. The other is the quantity issue. What if someone just says, no, we don't want it? I believe the project participation agreement allows for others to step up. It's optional at that point. So there's an optional step up at that point, but we can get back to you on details on that, Tom.
Okay.
And we have two hands raised. We had Jan Pepper, and then another hand disappeared, but you can raise it later if you want to. So Jan.
Thanks, Garish. I guess I'd like to get a little more clarification on the 60-day notice and exactly what amount of information we're going to be getting at that time. So is that going to be, will that be revealing what the projects are that are being discussed? And I guess, yeah, it's not exactly clear to me that it goes to the board, it goes to the CC Power Board for vote, but then that doesn't, it sounds like that does not obligate us to be a part of that project. And how does it work as far as who is a participant in the project versus who is not a participant in that project as far as who's voting? You could help provide some clarification on that.
Yeah, so I will try to answer all those questions. So for the 60-day notice, as far as what that notice entails, that is still a question that we're working on at the POC level, and exactly what we are going to bring to the board and what is all included in that notice. So we'll provide an update on that when we have that information. And then as far as approval at the CC Power level, that would be having the directors here basically approve the agreement as is and committing to bring it to their individual boards. So that's the commitment being made. Was there another question in there that I missed?
Yeah, I think that will, I think that's a little backwards. I think my board, my PCE board would want to know first what the project is and would want to direct me as to whether or not they agree with my approving or not approving the project. So I don't know if other board members here can comment on that, but it just feels like it's kind of the cart before the horse. And I'm not sure that I can make a vote on that without getting in trouble from my board, and I'm not going there. So
yeah, and I think
others are thinking about this, that would be helpful. Thank you.
And if I could just jump in, that 60-day notice does allow the individual members, like Mr. Chairman said, to socialize it with the individual boards. And I realize that does depend on what information is in that notice. So I just did want to throw that out there.
Okay, because
Jan?
if I don't have the actual information on what the project is, what's the pricing, all of that kind of stuff, I can't, there's nothing to talk to my board about.
So Jan, I think you bring up an excellent point. This sequence was not outlined in the joint powers agreement. All that the joint powers agreement is doing is just, there's a 60-day notice window that's being, so that's kind of what we're working on, but your point's a good one. The POC is looking at what information to provide. So we'll take that in and bring it to the POC to make sure that we put the horse first and then the cart. Horse in front. Okay, Barbara.
Thank you, Chair. And the questions that Director Pepper just raised, I just want to amplify. I think the horse can have the cart attached, but the cart has to be full of all of the documents and information. We just need as much, you know, as the General Counsel talks with the POC. I think the message I would like taken back to the table is that we need as much included in that 60-day notice as possible, so we can have those socializing conversations effectively with our governing boards. So thank you.
Yeah, and Jen, I share your concern. So that's something that my board would want to see too. So thank you, Barbara and Jen. Mitch.
Yeah, maybe just a suggestion along these lines, developing a process flow chart so that we can all sort of see it would be helpful, perhaps. Knowing where the decision points are going to be asked of us and which hats we're wearing at that point might be helpful.
That's great. That's great. And Mitch, you may have given yourself some work as part of the ad hoc committee with Lori and me. We'll get to work on that.
Not too late to duck out?
No, too late, too late. You've been voluntold already. Okay. I don't see any other questions or comments from the board, so let's move to public comment. Are there any comments on this item? We have one raised hand. That's Rick Bonilla. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Board. I can't back up strongly enough exactly what Jan Pepper expressed, which is that the board will need to be able to understand completely before Jan is able to vote on a project. So the 60-day notice, I would appreciate seeing that process flow chart and some further clarification there as a member of the executive committee at the board there. And I appreciate Director Hale and Girish yourself weighing in support of further clarification for the board members of the member agencies. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. So we'll bring it back to the board if there are any closing questions or comments. Not seeing any. We'll now move on to item 6E, and Tim, our general manager, is going to handle that.
Could you go to the first slide? Yes, thank you. While I order my screen. This item is with regard to the budget adjustment for the long duration project, as well as a cash call that would accompany the budget adjustment.
Sorry, Tim, I'm just going to interrupt just for a sec. This is item 6E. There's just a typo on the slide. So go ahead, Tim.
Sorry. Chris, would you go to the next slide, please? I apologize. This is an eye challenge, but I think that it highlights what it is that we have in front of us with regard to the budget adjustment. Let me see. The board adopted the agenda for the long duration storage in September. And what it did was authorized funding during that period of time the reasons that it chose not to go beyond that is that there was an uncertainty of need. There was also a question as to our ability to be able to come up with a contracting structure that would be effective. Since then, the Public Utility Commission has issued clarification on the need question. And as I've mentioned previously, we've come up with a contracting structure that will allow for joint contracting, limiting liability, and allowing for a financeable project. Let me see. So as I said, I wanted to just highlight for you the gap in the budget and the reasons that we have that gap. Our expectation is, as we've discussed a few minutes ago, closing the budget gap, it will allow us to be able to take these projects through the final negotiations, the drafting amongst the members, in order to be able to lead to the notice that we were talking about a few moments ago. If you go to the next slide, Chris, what this shows is what the budget adjustment is and how it is that those funds are allocated amongst the participating members. And so the budget adjustment is $123,016. It is allocated pursuant to the members' percent participation. I apologize for the mislabeling of the middle cell. Those should all be percentages. And so what you see is for each participating member, the percentage of participation in the long duration storage project and the allocation of the incremental cost for each. Let me see. There are a couple of things that I would highlight with regard to this. These are the steps that we're going to be taking here. Will be finalizing all the agreements that we have, and what we also intend to do is have these agreements be in a condition where they can be used, if chosen, to support the contracting structure for the long lead time resources. When I try and do a breakdown of the costs that are associated with an allocation of the costs that are associated with this, I see that it's about equally split between the contracting that would take place between CC Power and the seller, and between the contracting that would be in place between the participating members. And so just when I try and unpack the activities and the costs that are associated with this, that's the type of allocation that I arrive at. Just for a little bit of more edification, the contracting effort that has been undertaken by CC Power has been over a 10-month period. The total cost with this amendment would be around $500,000. And so, breaking that down to a cost per month basis, what would happen is that if we are able to, streamline our contracting process in subsequent RFPs, RFOs, we would have the ability to be able to, save about that much with each month, we shave off of the contracting effort that would be involved. And so this is what I wanted to present to support the incremental budget, as well as then how these costs would be allocated to each of the contracting members. And then with that, I would go to the next slide, which has the resolution for the budget increase, as well as then the allocation of the costs pursuant to that schedule that I've just provided. So, Mr. Chair, I take questions at this point.
Thank you, Tim. So we'll now open up for board member questions and clarification. After we get that done, we'll then we'll get some public comment and then come back for discussion and action. So we have one raised hand, Dawn.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Tim, if you could go back to the last slide that showed the budget breakdown. I wanted to ask about the allocation to MCE in particular, since we are not going to be able to continue with the current contracting effort. We hope to participate in future contracting efforts, but on the current one, I was assuming that we would kind of fit into the same category as EBCE, which is paying, I think it's around $8,000 for the administrative overhead, but not putting in for contracting costs going forward. I know we're already committed to pay for the contracting efforts through September, but after that, I don't think I can justify to my board a continued expense there, since we'll be contracting for these resources separately. But maybe I'm misunderstanding this chart.
No, I think that if I understood your question, and that is what you've currently obligated to pay for, and that would be based on this budget through September. Is that your question?
So if I could just clarify this, I think Dawn's saying she's not going to be part of the project after September.
Yes.
And so she wants to see a number, I think, she wants to zero out her LDS costs after September. And this doesn't show that. This is the incremental cost as if MCE is going to participate. Sorry to put words in your mouth, Dawn, but you could clarify.
That was beautifully stated, Gresh. I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah. If I may say so, we can come back to this. So I think stating at our meeting that you don't want to continue with it. So we do have some alternatives, but we can come back to that in a little bit. I do see another raised hand though, and Dawn will come back to your question. So Tom?
I think it's the same issue that Dawn has. As you probably know, we already stated we're probably not going to be continuing with this LDC. The one thing that I should add, which is something that Tim alluded to, that the additional funds that he's asking for to take him to the end of the year, part of it really is not being spent more specifically on LDC, but it is being spent on a project participation agreement, which pretty much will cover a lot of future projects that we may get into. So perhaps when we go back into discussing this, we should be reducing the allocation both to MCE and to 3CE, not down to zero, because I think all that additional money is needed. Part of it is going to go to talk about project participation agreement, which MCE as well as us will benefit from in future projects. But maybe what we need to do is to scale down that dollar figure for MCE and to us and take whatever that amount and and distribute it to the ones that are going to stay with the long duration storage.
Sorry.
That's my comment, Mr. Chair.
Tom, maybe I'll just clarify. I think what Don's talking about is none of the costs, whether it's ESSA, the supplier contracts, or the project participation agreement, would be allocated to 3CE or MCE starting October. Yeah.
Yeah, I understood exactly what she was suggesting, Girish. I was just pointing that out to MCE that we will, as well as they, will benefit from having a project participation agreement that's solid to serve future agreements. So maybe she will be willing, and as well as we will be willing to pay not the full amount that on that sheet, but a portion of it.
Okay, I misunderstood. So you're willing to pay for a portion of that development cost of the PPA, which will be utilized in many future projects of CC Power.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Other questions and comments from the rest of the board? Because we actually, Tim, I'm not sure, we do have, because both Tom and Don had informed us maybe outside of the board meeting. So I just want to make it formal that they are bowing out of the completion of the LDS project. Well, we did prepare an alternative to see how, if they leave, how the budget would impact, how the budget would be and the allocation would impact the remaining participants. So if we go down from 9 participants to 7, there would be a cost increase.
So Chris, could you go, you're interested in the spreadsheet that would show the allocation across 7 members, Girish?
Correct.
Chris, would you go to the slide in the deck, proposed budget, allocation of incremental costs, less MCE and 3CE?
Yep, it's showing up on my screen.
So the, let me see, let me find the right starting point for this part of the discussion. Reflected in the slide that we had on just a moment ago, 3CE and MCE were contributing $17,828 to the proposed budget increase. This table shows the reallocation of those costs amongst the remaining participating members. And so that's around $35,000 that we've spread to each of the participating members pursuant to the amount of the percentage of project participation that they would be now engaged in. And so again, the middle column is percentages, not dollars. So for instance, Clean Power SF would receive 10% of the contracting output and then receive that percentage of the total cost. And the other allocations would follow a similar methodology. So is that the table that you were looking for, Girish?
Yeah, so I think for the board, in terms of teeing this up for an action item, we would amend the resolution in the packet to have the same cost, incremental cost, 123,000, allocated to 7 members as per this slide, and that would be the action item in front of us. So I think so that would be the actual numbers. And I know, Tom, you mentioned maybe wanting to contribute a little bit over here for PPA development. And we could always amend this by a fixed dollar amount if you and Don want to do so. So I think that's the outline of where we are right now. Let me go to further questions and discussion, and we have Jan Pepper with her hands raised. Go ahead, Jan. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I wonder if there's an alternative. Tom suggested that he'd be willing to pay for a part of it. When Tim made his presentation, I think he stated that he thought about half of the costs were of benefit to all the members. So it sounds like perhaps doing an allocation where instead of all of it comes to those of us who remain, that it's split in a slightly different way.
I know it's never a good idea to do on the dais math, but just to follow up on this, Jan, the incremental cost between the first proposal and this one, it's about $7,000 incremental cost for Tom and $7,000 for Don. Or should I say, yeah. So if it's about half, so that would be $3,500 each. So that would be a $7,000 contribution from them to this budget.
I think, Girish, if I've read the initial spreadsheet correctly, I think it was 14,000 for us and 14,000 for Don. So I'm following Jan's suggestion. I think it's a fine one. If you want to drop that 14,000 to 7,000, and that would be our contribution to the continued effort on the project participation agreement. And if Jan and if Don would agree to the same, I would be fine with it.
So just to kind of tee up, someone at some point will make a motion that it sounds like if we want to change from the last slide that Tim had, it would be that $123,000 minus $14,000 contribution that comes in from the two of you, 7 and 7.
Yes.
Yeah. And then so we'll reallocate it based on that.
Girish, would it be helpful if we go back to slide, I believe, 7 that I had on the screen initially? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, and then we have Jan, but I did see Barbara do a hand raise physically, so raise your hand if you need it. And so Jan?
I think Barb had her hand up first, so I think Barb should go first. Then I'll go after Barb.
Yeah, I think bringing this slide up clarifies my question. I think I heard people using the 14,000 number for MCE and 3CE, and we can see here it's 17. So
Yeah,
I think what you would be proposing is half of 17, not half of 14.
Correct. So
Okay.
what number I come
Thank
up here with $8,914 to be exact.
Okay. Jan followed by Dawn.
Okay. So I'm just trying to put the numbers together from the board packet, which attachment B to the resolution showed for PCE that our total was 85,724 for both the LDS and general, and then with this addition, or depending however it comes out, the high end would be $93,001 for us. I just want to point out that I have authorization by my board to spend up to $100,000. So if there's another change that's going to make our amount for PCE go over $100,000, I wouldn't be able to vote on it. I'd have to get approval from my board and others of you who have similar kind of spending limits might have a similar situation. So I guess I'm saying if someone else drops out and the numbers change again, that it might get more complicated. But it's okay for today.
All right, thank you. Next up is Dawn.
Yeah, so
Lisa.
thanks. So yeah, just to weigh in on the, whether or not it would make sense for us to pitch in on the contracting effort, kind of with the argument that's being made is that there would be a benefit to all parties of, getting a contract in place, getting an ESSA drafted. I think I'm having a little trouble thinking about how I would justify that to my board and my team. I think we've definitely put in a lot so far, as we all have, and we're going to need to do a contracting effort on our own, developing our own agreements and that sort of thing. I think there are other parties that will certainly benefit from CC Power getting a contract in place, including EBCE and any other future CCAs that might join CC Power. So I'm kind of stuck between wanting to be really cooperative and and help out, because I don't want to leave others high and dry, but I also think from a logic perspective, I'm not seeing the logic in us continuing to pitch in when we do have the capability to develop our own PPAs and ESSAs and that sort of thing. So I don't think I'll be able to go forward with additional contributions on the current contracting effort. But I do want to support the administrative overhead and stick with future efforts that align with MCE's needs.
Thank you. Just for some maybe context from past experience, it's not atypical to have these kinds of things allocated where there's a startup again, as a startup JPA, this PPA, and this is the project participation agreement, where things like the project oversight committee and certain aspects of step-up provisions, operations, that's not in our typical PPA. So this is a first-time development, and you're right, Don, that future participants will benefit from this. So hear you. And so let's see, are there any other comments from board members? Okay, let me ask for comments from the public before we bring it back to getting to a vote. Any comments from the public? Rick Bonilla.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. Again, just seeking some clarification. It sounds like the numbers are yet unsettled. When they become settled, will the board be publishing how if things were worked out and decided? That's the question. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, don't see any other questions, no request for public comment, so let's bring it back to the board. I'm thinking maybe Jan's question from before should be addressed over here. And let me just see here. The existing budget has about 68,000 for the larger members. And if we go to 25,000 more, it'll still be less than 100,000. So Jan, I think you should be good if 7 of us stay in. So I think that's just a threshold issue, maybe in terms of ability to vote. So Tom, I heard what you said, but it sounds like, do you want to, any other comments you want to make?
No, I mean, I'm hearing Don. I understand what you're saying. In effect, we did make a reasonable contribution, not just to the PPA, but also to the effort to bring the work with the developers to where it's at today. And maybe that's reasonable enough. So I would recommend that you include the second sheet instead of the first sheet, and not try for a third sheet.
Okay. To help the board up, maybe for the next step, Brittany, do we have a proposed resolution? But before that, Jan, you have a question.
Sorry. I'm just wondering how critical it is to make this decision today. Because there may be some mistakes in some of the calculations. There may be other shifting around that goes as we've been asked to reaffirm that whether we're in or out by Friday. So I'm and also doing the calculations on the fly like this. If there's an error, then there's an issue. So is it possible? Is it necessary that we make this decision today? Could this be moved to September?
My own personal opinion is these are such small dollar numbers, and it takes so much of our time to keep going back on this. So I see just from the dollars, and if we have agreement on 7, we should just move forward. We are at the last lap of our agreements too. I think it'll give some clarity to our contractors. The numbers with 7 have been calculated prior to the meeting. And so that's the slide that got put up prior. So I think the rabbit trails of trying to contribute more, we're not talking about that. It's just the slide that was put up earlier with MCE and 3CE zeroed out. So these are the numbers that we're looking for. And the motion would basically be something to the effect of approving this. That'll take us through the end of the year for the LDS project and get us to that last lap. So, Barbara?
Thank you, Chair. I was struggling to find my hand raising electronically. I just want to make sure I'm clear. What we're proposing, well, let me back up. I think we learned on Tuesday evening that MCE was dropping and not participating.
On the chart that's being shown right now, with a total amount of 123016.
Excuse me. Okay, yeah, he's been muted. Okay, thank you.
That and now if we vote today on this budget, we'll be committing to make payments through November, I believe. But additional participants may drop out by the Friday requested deadline. So I guess my point is, if between now and Friday, we may lose more people, but those people will be obligated to pay through November. Is that what we're discussing doing here?
Yeah, so I'm not sure about the Friday deadline. We are the board, so you can make the decision. And so if you decide today, you're right, you're committing actually through December. So,
December.
Through December. So just stepping back, when we did the LDS project budget, we only funded it through September 30th. So this will take us through December. And so I've asked Brittany to put up this resolution. Go ahead, Brittany.
I was just going to add to that. We will also be sending out an amended cost sharing agreement with these new amounts that would need to be signed by the parties.
Brittany, this is, no, we had a version which had a red line, right?
Yes, yeah. So to revise the resolution to reflect this conversation, we would revise item number 2. That would authorize the treasurer to issue cash calls to the members participants to cover the remainder of 2021 as summarized in attachment B. And we would add as amended to exclude Marin Clean Energy and Central Coast Community Energy from further commitment in excess of the budget amount approved at the June 16, 2021 board meeting, and to reallocate those funds to the remaining members.
Okay, thank you. Lori, followed by Jan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to really thank Tim and the Chair for all of the work to date. This is, quite historic in my view, and it just takes a lot of work, especially to put the first agreement together. So just really appreciate all the focus. And from my perspective, I think it's quite difficult to figure out how to do this. I mean, inevitably, those of us that are in the first project are going to fund these startup costs. And so I don't know that there's a way forward to be completely equitable about that, while understanding that each CCA needs to make their own decision. I guess where I'm at is I think it's really important to go forward. I think proving out this model that CCAs can procure jointly together is really, really important. And so with that, I'll be supporting the resolution. Just really thankful for all the work to date. And maybe I'll leave it at that.
Did I hear you make a motion, or was that you're waiting for?
Sure,
for
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, as amended, I'm in the, yeah.
Yes, as amended.
Okay. So I may have taken that out of order, but typically when we have a motion, we need a second, right? So before we go to comments, so.
It's Barbara. I'll second it with the correction of Central Coast Community Energy's spelling of their name.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we'll go now to Jan. And so we have a second from San Francisco. We'll go to Jan, followed by Jeff.
I just had a question in terms of process. Is it possible for us to delay this vote or do an email vote next week after we've all had our own abilities internally to take a relook at the project? Because we haven't had a chance to really digest the implication of 3CE and MCE pulling out and what that means for us and other things like that. So it would be hard for me to vote on this. I don't want to, I want to be supportive, but I'm not sure I can vote yes when there's a lot of questions still unanswered.
Is there any question we could address right now? Because it's essentially, oh, you need to go back. You're saying you need to go back and discuss it with your staff?
Well, yeah, we haven't internally been able to look at what's the implication of two of the larger members, two of the credit rated members pulling out of the project. And so what does that mean? Maybe it doesn't mean anything, but we haven't had a chance to have that internal discussion. And I'd like to be able to do that, but that's all. So I'm just wondering, process-wise, is there a way for us to delay the vote? It sounds like you don't want to do that until, you don't want to wait till September, but is it possible to wait, a couple of days? And if the answer is no, that's fine. It's a process question.
Okay. I'll let our attorney answer as in terms of noticing and Brown Act and everything else.
Yeah, it would have to be a special meeting that we would have to create. There wouldn't be any voting email process or anything like that. We would have to properly notice a special meeting just for this vote.
Thank you, Brittany. Jeff?
I'm in support of this, and I think the logic I'm using is not one of just customer cost and rates. I'm going all the way back to last summer when we let, I think it was Beth Vaughn let PG&E know and Ed Randolph that we're going through a joint procurement process for long duration storage. And if you had approached me back then and said for $10 or $15 or even $20,000, would you pay a lobbyist to elevate the status of CCAs into the world of joint procurement? I would have said, sure, even if there was no other return on the investment. So I just share that as a perspective that I think this experiment has some value separate and apart from this deal. And that's why we're still in it. I actually think the price we're going to pay on long duration storage may not be better than we can negotiate on our own, but I still feel it's really valuable for this. So I'm in support. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. So I don't see any other hands raised by the board. So let's take it to a vote.
Okay, for resolution 210801 as amended, Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power San Francisco,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy is absent, I believe. Marin Clean Energy,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Okay, the resolution carries.
Thank you. And thank you, all the board members for this discussion. Really appreciate it. So we'll now move to item 6F, discussion of any individual member items. Is there anything that you would like to share? Yeah, Jeff?
I do have one very brief thing. I just spent the earlier part of today meeting with a number of water agencies in our territory. And this is utterly tangential to CC Power's business, but I will flag that the number of agencies looking at 5 to 10, maybe 15-year projects that could consume vast amounts of electricity in order to protect water supplies, whether through pumping and groundwater reinjection in the winter, or desalinization plants, or reverse osmosis, or you name it, is just mind-blowing. And we cannot be alone in Sonoma and Mendocino counties. And so I just encourage you all to reach out to your water districts, your water supply entities, and have those conversations, because if they're going to need to install a 25 megawatt desal plant in your district, you're going to want to know long in advance. So anyway, it was really eye-opening for me. Just encourage the rest to follow suit. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Another change to our business. Yeah. Barbara?
Thank you, Chair. I would just add to what Director Seifert just mentioned. Also a drought-related impact is the fact that entities like mine, the San Francisco PUC, are being asked to curtail their water delivery and conserve water delivery, which means we aren't generating as much electricity. So that same drought incentive that's driving a desire for more electricity is also driving a potential reduction in hydro generation on the market. So we're hearing from the ISO that they want us to generate more, and we're hearing from the water board to hold water. So, trying to resolve those kind of conflicting directives from the state, but the ultimate outcome could be less electricity available from hydro.
I'll just mention to the board that East Bay Clean Energy and us have partnered on a clean energy power prepay. So both our boards have approved it. So we'll be issuing a little north of, it'll be about $1.25 billion 30-year bonds. And we should be getting about somewhere between a $3 to $4 a megawatt hour discount on the power that goes through that. So yeah, we'll share the information with all of you, but we have a lot of information on our website already. So, okay, anyone else? Okay, I don't see any raised hands. So thank you all board members very much. We will adjourn this meeting and see you all in September. Thank you.